We have 1 billion people starving on this planet right now. That's the truth. And it's going on the rise again. So that's a big concern. And in the meantime, we have 300,000 people in addition to feed every day on this planet. 300,000 is huge. And most of them, they are more demanding in calorie because of this fast growing population and this high calorie demand. We will have to provide as much food, to produce as much food in the next 50 years or so as we produced over the last 10,000 years if we really want to feed the entire planet. So let's become farmers in the ocean. That will be a revolution because out of this, you can grow everything around. Once again, you start growing crops and then you create ecosystem and you feed livestock. And the same with seaweed. You start to grow seaweed and then you feed fish, you feed shellfish, and we have a big problem with the food system. And in the meantime, we have to grow more and more food. So it's like an impossible equation to solve because you need to produce more food. You still have 1 billion people starving, and the way you have to produce food are either declining, either having a very, very negative environmental impact. So the question we were ending up was like, should we produce more food and impact badly our environment in the worst way, or should we start to take care of our environment and leave millions, if not billions, of people dying from starvation?
Hi, in today's episode, we have with us Vincent Doumeizel, who's a senior advisor on ocean-based solutions at the UN Global Compact. Renowned for his advocacy in sustainable seaweed utilization, which I had not heard too much about, and we'll ask Vincent to tell us more about it. With a background in environmental stewardship and global food security, Vincent promotes seaweed's potential to revolutionize agriculture, mitigate climate change, and foster marine biodiversity. He co-founded and directs the Global Seaweed Coalition, collaborating with international stakeholders to advance seaweed farming initiatives worldwide. This is extremely new for me, Vincent. Welcome to the show. You have to tell me your journey with seaweed. When did it begin and how has it evolved over the years?
Well, it has begun, I think, many years ago. I started my career in Africa, working for the French government there, and I somehow witnessed what was world hunger. And that was kind of a shock for me. And I decided to work through my career to mitigate world hunger somehow and make of this world the first one with the first zero hunger generation. But then I realized it was not possible on land because we have exhausted our land and we are over exploiting our land right now. And then traveling around the world, it dawned on me that yes, there was a resource that does not need land, nor pesticide, nor fresh water, that grows out of the blue, and seaweed. So that's how it started. And then I started actually with an idea to grow that I pitched to a foundation who supported me to grow seaweed in between offshore wind farms, so we can do what we call a multi-use of the ocean. And that went very popular. It was picked up by the EU, who funded 20 million to build the first demonstrators, and then US got interested, and then UN, and that's how it went from there to where we are today.
So I'm going to come down to seaweed, but I want to understand a little bit more about world hunger. If you could just explain to some of our listeners, what are the kind of findings that you've had about world hunger?
Well, the finding that I had was that we have 1 billion people starving on this planet right now. That's the truth. And it's going on the rise again. So that's a big concern. And in the meantime, we have 300,000 people in addition to feed every day on this planet. 300,000 is huge. And most of them, they are more demanding in calorie because they want meat, they want fish, and they want the proteins and so forth. All in all, because of this fast growing population and this high calorie demand, we will have to provide as much food, to produce as much food in the next 50 years or so as we produced over the last 10,000 years if we really want to feed the entire planet. And in the meantime, the yields are declining. We have exhausted our soil. The cities grow bigger and bigger, and there are less and less arable land. And in the meantime, the food systems that we have built became and have become the biggest contributor to greenhouse gas, to water scarcity, to soil depletion, to biodiversity loss, and to social injustice in some ways, because it contributes a lot to modern slavery and other kind of social injustice. So we have a big problem with the food system, and in the meantime, we have to grow more and more food. So it's like an impossible equation to solve, because you need to produce more food. You still have 1 billion people starving, and the way you have to produce food are either declining, either having a very, very negative environmental impact. So the question we were ending up was like, should we produce more food and impact badly our environment in the worst way? Or should we start to take care of our environment and leave millions, if not billions, of people dying from starvation? That was not an easy question to answer. I'm sure you agree. And then it dawned on me that somehow the world is blue. This planet is blue. It's covered by ocean that contribute to that covers 70% of our planet. So 70% of our planet is covered by ocean, and this ocean, they contribute to less than 2% of our food. So how come we have totally neglected 70% of the planet as a food source, and we leave 1 billion people starving? That's where I realized that we should develop something out of the ocean if we want to feed the next generation, because otherwise they will starve or they will destroy the planet, and one will not prevent the other, because the more you will destroy the planet, the more people will starve, because the yields will decline further and further. So actually, to step out of this impossible equation, I think the ocean is the only solution.
You traveled extensively and discovered seaweed in Asia. What inspired you to focus on seaweed as a solution, to global challenges? What was the inspiration?
Well, my take was like, we moved from modern history. We moved from prehistory to modern history back 12,000 years ago, when we stopped being hunters-gatherers and became farmers. But that was only on land. So we started to grow crops on land, and then once we were good enough at growing crops, we start to feed our livestock with them. But in the ocean, we are still hunters-gatherers. We are just fishing, which is like hunting, and with the exception of Asia, most of the seaweed that we have is a wild harvest. So we are hunters-gatherers. And if we need to become civilized with the ocean, and stop considering the ocean as a big litter box where we dump all our waste and destroy biodiversity, we should start about using the ocean in a regenerative way. Well, the first trophic level in the ocean, the equivalent of the crops or the plants in the ocean, are seaweed. So it makes sense, if we want to repair the ocean instead of destroying them, seaweed is the best place to start. Indeed, in Asia, I witnessed that great solution. It's only used for food in Asia, but it's a great source of food, and it contributes a lot to support the nutritional profile and the nutritional intake from this fast-growing population there. That's how I realized the importance of this solution of seaweed to global challenges.
So can you explain the concept of seaweed revolution and its potential impact?
Well, the seaweed revolution is there. We had the green revolution 12,000 years ago. Now it's time for the seaweed revolution, which will be equivalent to this green revolution we have experienced when we became farmers. So let's become farmers in the ocean. That will be a revolution, because out of this, you can grow everything around. Once again, you start growing crops, and then you create ecosystem, and you feed livestock, and you create a blah, blah. And the same with seaweed. You start to grow seaweed, and then you feed fish, you feed shellfish and crustaceans and so forth, and all the way, and the entire marine life is restored. So, the concept is not only to grow seaweed and eat seaweed. The concept is to grow something really regenerative, create like a permaculture in the ocean, where you can grow seaweed as well as many other resources, and create a link of life also between the land and the ocean, because we have lost that link. Most of the runoff and the sewage pollutants that we dump, that we use on land, end up in the ocean, and we do not manage them. And I think it's time to create a connection, a live connection, a circular economy between the land and the ocean. And seaweed can help a lot, because seaweed will grab the nutrients in the ocean and upcycle them in a positive way, so you can put them back on land. So it really creates not only support for marine life, but also support for land vegetation. And that's where it's a very, very powerful element. And also something to mention is that it's very hard to talk about the potential impact of seaweed, because seaweed is such a wide range of organisms. There is 12,000 different types of seaweed, which are very, very different. Green seaweed were the first, green and red seaweed were the first complex living organism on the planet. The green seaweed, they moved on land during the Cambrian era, back 500 million years ago only, because seaweed are 1 to 2 billion years old. But 500 million years ago only, the green seaweed moved on land and gave birth to the entire vegetation around us. So today, if you look at a tree around you or grass, it's genetically closer to a green seaweed than a green seaweed is to a red seaweed. The difference between a green seaweed and a red seaweed is bigger than the difference from an evolutionary and genetic perspective, bigger than the difference between a fungi and an elephant.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's important because, this wide range of genetic diversity offers an equally wide range of potential impact and application. It's a multifaceted solution which can be used for many different things, not only food, but feed, plastics, animal, and so forth. So animal feed, biostimulants for the land, and so forth. So it's really a great source of solution.
So you're actually saying that seaweed has got environmental superpowers, right?
Yeah, somehow it has. Yeah, it has. First of all, because that's the source of life in the ocean. So all our environment has evolved starting around seaweed. So if you want to repair this environment, of course, just like if you want to repair your house, which is about to be destroyed, you're not going to start by the roof. You're going to start by the foundation. And the foundation of life on the planet is plankton and seaweed. Basically, that's the first living organism there. So it makes sense to restore them. And then the rest will grow again. So it does have a kind of superpowers. And they are among the fast growing organisms. For some of them, they can grow up to 40 centimeters a day to reach 60 meters high. So they are like sea forest. And I think that a more relevant name than seaweed, by the way, or sea vegetables, because if you want to tell everyone how delicious they are, and good for the health. But I think, they are like forests. So they repair the environment. They will clean the water. They will replace some pollutants, such as fertilizers, such as plastics. They will provide new type of resources more sustainable than the existing one. So and of course, when it comes to the environment, there's a big, but I'm sure we'll discuss that further, a potential for climate change mitigation as well. So it's really an environmental solution, but not only, there's also a social aspect, because seaweed will bring revenues and job to coastal community, notably to women, because we've seen that in Southeast Asia and East Africa, seaweed revenues mostly benefit women. So it's a very strong way to contribute to women empowerment and to further gender equality. So that's so important. So environment, superpower, yes. Social, food, it's the multifaceted solution.
So Vincent, tell me a little bit more about women when you say that seaweed revolution will impact and be beneficial for women. So what do you mean by that?
If you look at what happened in Zanzibar, for instance, and by the way, the Zanzibar production of seaweed today is it's like 10 times more than in India. So a small island, which is 100 kilometers long. They have developed the seaweed cultivation there, copying what was done in Philippines back 30 years ago, starting in 1988. And at this time, women were locked at home, literally. They had no right to step out of home except for funerals, which was the only reason why a woman was authorized to go out of home without any permission from her husband. So that was really like a really patriarchal, traditional, and Muslim country. region. And women were not in the market. You cannot see any women in the street and so forth. They were really literally at home. And then the fishing resources declined. We started to, some people, some industry from the West started to implement seaweed cultivation there because it was easy. You just need two sticks and a rope, and you put some seaweed, and there it grows, so it's easy. And so the husband, they kept fishing. It was less and less good in terms of outcome, but they kept trying, and they asked their woman to go on the beach and to farm seaweed. And now seaweed in Zanzibar is the third biggest export resource in the island. And 80% of these revenues coming from this exportation are going to women. And you can see, all along the coast of Zanzibar, you will find women farming seaweed everywhere, and they can dry it for free. They don't need any capex, any investment, whatever. And now women became literate. They send their girl to school. And now, you know what? The president of Tanzania is a woman from Zanzibar, which is quite symptomatic of what happened. But you can see the same trend somehow in Indonesia, where you would find a very family-based organization around seaweed farming, where women does a part of the job, men does another part of the job, do another part. So it's very shared, and it's very equal contribution and retribution as well. So, and historically speaking, there's a great story between women and seaweed. I don't know why exactly, but all along the story. If you go in Japan and Korea, these women diving to grab wild seaweed for generations and generations. Back in the Victorian age in UK, you see a growing interest from women to seaweed, and while the men were away to discover lions and whales and amazing things in the other side of the world. Women were home, but they work on botany through the observation of seaweed. There's always a connection, and I was part of a workshop some years ago where I was only with women CEOs of a seaweed company, and our main action was to create the Seaweed organization supporting women as CEOs and in seaweed company. But yeah, so I think there's a great link and something very important to be written. There's a natural connection from the beginning between women and seaweed.
Oh, yeah. I can agree with you with a whole lot of many other connections of women apart from only seaweed. But we will not get down to that. We have to know from you that you've been the driving force behind the Seaweed Manifesto. What is its purpose?
Well, I first presented the seaweed revolution concept to the UN back in 2020, and people were so amazed that they say, well, we need to spread the word. We need to spread this seaweed gospel. And the best way is to have something that is non-arguable. So let's gather the best scientists, the best seaweed experts around the world, bring them together, create a 10 or 20-page document about, okay, what is the potential? What are the hurdles? Why it's not taking off faster? And what should we do? And that was the idea. So we brought together, with the help of the World Bank, of the UN, of FAO, of Nestle, of big universities from all around the world. We brought together a group of people. We reached a consensus on a certain number of things, and then we had this document that was able to say, yes, seaweed can do that. Scientifically proven, not by the French, not by the American, not by the Indian, by everyone. Everyone agrees about that, and that's what needs to be done. So now let's take action. And I think it was very beneficial for the seaweed industry to have this kind of document. And out of this, we managed to convince the foundation. But one of the big conclusions of the manifesto was the lack of collaboration, the high level of fragmentation around seaweed. So we decided to create a coalition, and we convinced the foundation to fund a few million euros to create the first ever global seaweed coalition, the first ever global coalition of seaweed stakeholders, which is now gathering 2,000 organizations around the world and getting united to work together first to share science, to accelerate science, to accelerate to ease funding as well, to be in a better position to request bigger funding, bigger investment, trying to structure, if you want, the seaweed industry, as well as to influence on regulation. We have a big problem with regulation, which are most of them irrelevant for the seaweed industry. So there's a big work from this coalition to try to make better regulation for seaweed, and also to spread the word and to do some advocacy, to support science, so we can learn how to cultivate seaweed and so forth. So yeah, I think the manifesto was kind of a catalytic document, which has created all this interest and enabled a lot of tangible things in the end.
So, seaweed farming promotes sustainable development and also supports marine ecosystems. Am I right? If you could just explain a little bit about the supporting of the marine ecosystem, Vincent, for our listeners.
Well, it's just like a forest, I mean, if you want to regrow life on land, I mean, you will mostly plant a forest. And same for seaweed. I mean, seaweed supports biodiversity. It will provide food. It will provide habitat to marine life so they can reproduce. It will degrade and create sediments to the tiniest life in the ocean. So it is really like a forest. So yeah, I mean, and that's the comparison is relevant because we are losing them just as quick just as fast as we are losing the land forest. We lost 80% of the biggest wild seaweed forest, which is of California. Over the last 5 years, we lost 80% of it. And the same goes with in Norway and Australia and South Africa. So we need to be very careful because we need to preserve and replant this forest. Otherwise, they will disappear, and we will as well, ultimately, because they are, once again, the fundamental brick for the chain of life on the planet.
So we're talking also about seaweed textiles that are making waves. I mean, we know about the fashion industry and its contribution to the pollutants all across the world. How can you revolutionize the fashion industry? How is seaweed being used in industries such as textiles, cosmetics, and pharmaceuticals? Cosmetics, I've seen quite a few brands talk about seaweed in their products and marine collagen and all of that. But tell me a little bit more about textiles. I'd really love to know a little bit about textiles.
Well, textile is one of the application, and I'm sure we'll mention the other one. But textile is important because textile is, well, micro fibers are synthetic fibers are, I mean, damaging our ocean because of plastic pollution. They are creating this plastic pollution, and in the meantime, cotton is not better because cotton is 2% of the cultivation in the world, and represent 25% of the pesticides and 10% of the herbicide. So it does concentrate for a very small portion of land, a very high level of pesticide and herbicides, and it takes a lot of water as well. I mean, a t-shirt made of cotton requires 4,500 liters of water, and seaweed have the same properties somehow than cotton, because once again, cotton is a descendant from seaweed in the end. So from some green seaweed. So you can find the same type, you can create the same type of yarn with seaweed, and that's already there. So you have more and more companies that are really doing great things using seaweed as a source of fibers or yarn, of even textile. I mean, you have a great artist in India, Runa Ray, who is pioneering worldwide. Really, she's one of the best, if not the best, for fashion in made from seaweed industry. And you have a lot of initiative. I mean, I partner with a foundation, the Ocean-Born Foundation, through initiative Ocean-Born Lifestyle, where we are selling the seaweed-made t-shirts, and the benefit goes to seaweed research. So yeah, it's absolutely great about what can be done, because you take an unsustainable resources that is damaging the environment and you replace it by something very regenerative. And Stella McCartney as well is very, very interested. I mean,
Yeah.
she's partnering. Yeah. She's, I mean, promoting the vegan aspect of things. She's supporting a lot this seaweed new material, and she released the collection, I think, made partly from seaweed. So I think it's coming.
Oh, wow. So we need to look out for more seaweed fashion coming forward. What are the main obstacles for scaling up seaweed farming globally? What would be the issues?
We need to learn how to grow seaweed. I mean, the main obstacle would be first, people have to understand that seaweed is good for Earth and good for the planet. That's the best food you can get. They need to integrate that in their daily diet. I mean, if you look in Japan, I mean, seaweed is present in 10% of the dish. And we know that Japanese, I mean, people in Japan, they have the long life expectancy in the world, and they have the lowest level of cancer, biodiversity, diabetes, obesity, and so forth. So they are really, really super healthy, notably because of seaweed, and that has been quite proven. So it's important as a source of food. It's very important, and we need to make everyone aware of this, because each time you eat and you drink, somehow you vote for the world you want. So the bigger obstacle is all of us, because we don't eat seaweed, with the exception of Asia, where seaweed is mainstream. Seaweed cultivation represents already 40 million tons, almost 40 million tons of production a year. So like something very important. So yeah, we need to support that and to spread the word and try to change our diet. And I think chefs are very important, because they are very strong influencers when it comes to cuisine. And we need to hear from them about new recipe, new ways to eat seaweed and so forth. And I keep being told, wow, seaweed is no good, it has no good taste. But I mean, if you try a raw potato or a raw cocoa bean, it's no good either. But chips or chocolate is delicious. So it's about the same. You need to learn how to cook seaweed and do some good things. So one is advocacy. We need to spread the word that seaweed is delicious and good for the planet. Second, we need to learn how to cultivate them, and it's not there yet. I mean, the ocean is a very complex environment, and you will not. I mean, of course, Asia has domesticated seaweed over the last 60 years. They have focused a lot of effort on the seaweed cultivation. We have not in the rest of the world, and I mean Asia, North Asia. India is totally out of it. Seaweed is nowhere in India yet, and that's something important. But we need to domesticate our own species. And because, I mean, if you are in Canada, you will not try to grow rice, banana, and guava. You know, you will try to grow some other stuff that are growing naturally there. It's exactly the same with seaweed. You cannot grow species that are not endemic, and it's not advisable for us because the yields will be very low, but also it can be dangerous in terms of invasive species. So don't do that. We never do that. And we need to learn that. But that's a big problem as well, because it takes up a lot of science. I mean, it requires a lot of science to domesticate seaweed and to have good yields out of seaweed. So it takes years and years. The other problem will be the regulation. The regulation is a big problem, because we have, once again, irrelevant regulation in terms of maximum of this and of this, because we don't know anything about seaweed. So most of the regulation are irrelevant. The other last thing will be like a technological hurdle about how to decompose seaweed in various subcompounds. Because not all seaweed will be delicious, of course. I mean, they are all edible, by the way, but they will not all be delicious as the texture or the taste. So that you may want to do something different out of seaweed. You will do biostimulant to foster plant growth. You will do animal feed, extracting the nutrients. You will do polymer and biopackaging, replacing plastic. You will do textile and so forth, and all of it at once in one seaweed. But you need to understand how to extract these different bioactive. And so far, we are pretty weak into that. There's very little companies doing this kind of biorefinery of seaweed. There's a couple of them in the world, and there's a lot to learn around this.
Amazing. I mean, you know what? This is just the start, Vincent. So I'm sure it's everybody is today realizing that this is the need of the hour. For the way the weather pattern is changing around us, we all have to embrace, all the new things that are coming up that's more sustainable. So India as a country has got a very vast coastline with, biodiversity. So what specific actions do you think that India can take to harness the potential of seaweed farming and contribute more effectively, to global sustainability efforts?
Well, it's a great opportunity for India. I mean, you have hundreds of seaweed species along your coast, 17,000 kilometers of coastline, a great potential. And seaweed, once again, can be used in India for food, for feed, for biostimulant, to replace plastics. So we can do a lot of different things out of seaweed, and you can repair your coastal environment, as well as once again, get all the nutrients that ending up in the water and recycle them instead of losing them for millions of years because they will sink in the deep ocean and get sedimented there, and you will not have access to them before millions of years. So let's get them into seaweed and then recycle them on land. So you can reuse them as, I don't know, nitrogen, phosphorus, and so forth, all type of good stuff for your land. So that's a great potential for India. What needs to be done in India, I think, is licensing, make it easier to farm seaweed for local communities, develop some kind of kits to tell people how to do it, to train people, focus a bit further on science and research, understand how to grow your endemic species, and be more efficient at it, and spread the word as well in the Indian community, because your culture in terms of diet is not really open to seaweed yet. So I think we need to make Indian people aware of the delicious taste, especially for a country that has a vast community of vegetarian, because seaweed has a lot of protein, much more than soy. For instance, red seaweed that grows in India can go up to 40% protein when soy is 25%. Seaweed is also the only vegetal, the only plant or plant-like that has vitamin B12, the only non-animal source of vitamin B12, which is so important for our brain. So if your diet is without meat, which is good, I'm vegetarian as well, better have a lot of seaweed to compensate the lack of protein and the lack of vitamin B12 and the lack of, and so forth. And there's also iodine, zinc, magnesium, omega-3 long chain, which are so important for our brain, and so forth. So there's a lot of good stuff, but there's also a very strong taste like umami, which is very specific. So people, they are like, in the beginning, because it's very new to them. So I think we have to educate our taste to seaweed, and I think that's what needs to be done. Because if you don't create a market, you will never create an industry. It's a chicken and egg. You cannot create an industry before the market is there, and it's hard to create a market before the industry is there. So you have to grow step by step, and that's mostly political, I think, decision. And I think India is working on it right now. There's more and more signal from the government that is getting interest. The nutritional aspect from seaweed will be great. And I hope that just like we have in France a couple of months ago, we will have a global roadmap for seaweed expansion, seaweed cultivation expansion, just like we have in France only a few months ago. So I think that's a political requirement for India to support the development of the seaweed industry, because it's such a great, maybe the greatest untapped resource you have on the planet, basically.
So where do you see the seaweed revolution heading in the next decade?
Well, I hope we will see the number of farms growing again and again, and the number of consumers and more seaweed everywhere on the planet, because we've not mentioned that, but it's also good for the climate. Seaweed is a very good climate solution because it does not take, it absorbs a lot of greenhouse gas as it grows. So I hope we will recognize all this advantage. And I hope we will provide our next generation, our children, with hopes and solutions out of seaweed. I'm the father of 3 kids, but I feel a bit sorry because I keep feeding them with fears and drama about the future, especially in Europe. I think India is a bit more positive about the future, but in Europe we keep feeding them with fears, and I think we need to feed them with hopes and solutions. And seaweed is a great source of hopes. So I hope it will be recognized by everyone, so that gradually we can walk around and we can become this first generation ever to feed the entire planet with safe and sustainable food, while mitigating climate change, while restoring biodiversity, and alleviating poverty and balancing social injustice somehow. So I think that's what we can hope for the future with this evolution, that this seaweed revolution could contribute to this in the next decade.
For listeners interested in supporting the seaweed revolution, what is it that they can do, Vincent?
Well, first is to read the fantastic book, The Seaweed Revolution, available in English. Besides this, I think we all have a role to play in starting to build a market. Once again, eating seaweed, try to get interested, spread the word around you, talk about seaweed, talk about the fantastic potential of seaweed. And once again, we've named a few of them, but there's more. It can be a source of building materials, medicine, can be a great source of medicines with bioactives that are so important. In China, they are trying to cure Alzheimer out of seaweed. So there's a lot of things to be said, of stories to be told. So I think that, which is why I wrote a book actually, to tell all this story, and so it can spread around. And I think the best thing is to spread the stories, to give a chance to the next generation to take part to it. And then, I mean, if you're young enough, I mean, let's study marine biology. Let's understand what's happening in the ocean. We know more about what's happening on the moon than in the ocean. The ocean is a big unknown to everyone. So let's start to work together in any way we do, to know better about the ocean and understand better how to manage better this ocean and get the resources from there, while repairing the environment and repairing the cycle of nutrients around us. So I think that's what we all have to do. But first thing, easy one, start to eat seaweed and see how they are delicious. That's the first thing.
Where are you headed next, Vincent? Any exciting projects that's coming up for you?
Wow, there's a lot. I'm invited in Madagascar, in Bali, in Colombia for the COP Biodiversity, because people tend to understand that seaweed is so important for the biodiversity. I'm invited to Baku, of course, for the COP Climate, because we have to demonstrate that seaweed has a role to play in climate mitigation and should be rewarded for that. So we should manage to get a carbon credit mechanism for seaweed cultivation somehow. That's part of it. I will head to New York as well in September, because nothing grows in isolation. And we are launching, similarly to what we did with the Seaweed Manifesto, we are launching a plankton manifesto, because we realize that if we want to develop seaweed farming, we need to understand what's happening around seaweed. And everything around seaweed is plankton. So there's plankton everywhere, millions of planktonic organisms in one drop of water. So, and that has a lot of influence on seaweed. So we gathered the 30 best experts in the world on this topic, and we are launching in next September a plankton manifesto, which will complement somehow our work on seaweed. So a lot of exciting things, plus books and graphic novels and children books and so forth. So a lot of exciting things, and we will keep working with the countries as well to develop a national strategy for seaweed at national level for each and every country. That's something very important. We are progressing well with the EU, well with the US. We hope India will join soon. And of course, we need to take advantage and understand better of what's happening in Asia. There's more and more collaboration. I had a 2 weeks trip in a seaweed tour in Japan, which was very interesting. But they have also a lot to learn from us, because they only do food out of seaweed, and there's so much more you can do out of it. I think there's a lot to learn from everyone, and collaboration is highly needed. So I will keep spreading the seaweed gospel around the world, and keep trying to make everyone collaborate, so we can really harness this potential and leverage on this seaweed revolution.
Thank you so much, Vincent, for being on today's podcast. We wish you lots and lots of luck with the seaweed revolution and the plankton revolution. And, we would look forward to many more projects from you. And thank you so much for being on today's podcast.